Okay, today we are going to go with the flow, take a look at the heart and soul of the message of Jesus. I assumed that I had spoken on this subject before, go with the flow, because it's pretty much a cliche, and I actually try to avoid cliches, and I looked up in our catalog of online programs. There's over 300 programs on YouTube that we've put up over the years. And believe it or not, I didn't have any title called Go with the Flow, so I thought that's what I would talk about today. And the reason is because I think we can come up with a pretty good analogy of how to think of our life, our experience, whatever we're having, whatever we're going through now. And I think we will find some parallels in the teachings of Jesus. And by saying this is Jesus in a nutshell, I'm not saying this is all that Jesus taught and all that Jesus represents. But you'll find the theme I'm going to share today, you'll find a lot of this in his parables and in his various teachings. But a river flows in a single direction, but we can paddle our canoe in two directions. We can take the easy way of flowing with the current, or we can take the more difficult way of paddling upstream and going against the current. Okay, so you have this picture of a river, and the Colorado River is very happily flowing now. It's why we have so much silt in our watering system. But it flows in one way, one direction. And we know that. It's a given. It's a law. Water seeks the lowest level, and it's heading to the sea. So it flows in one direction, but we could get in our canoe and paddle two directions. We've got two choices. We can go upriver or we can go down. So when you look at the teachings of Jesus, he talks about a flow. He talks about a way. And what we're going to be talking about with flowing with the current is the idea of inside out. And outside in is paddling against the current. And what's that mean? The idea of inside out means that we establish some level of what we are looking for in whatever kind of experience we want to settle. Just say like right now we're looking for a place for our church. To go from the inside out, what's the first thing we do? We don't have a place to go yet. So to do an inside-out approach to flow in this way is to establish first the peace of mind. How would I feel if we had this now? Whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe you've received it. That's a change of attitude. That's an inside-out approach. To believe you've received something before you receive it says, I'm going to experience what I'm hoping this outside achievement will give me. I'm going to experience that within myself first. That's really what prayer is all about. It's taking time to be still and say, the presence of God is here working through me now. That the thing I'm looking for is not here, but that does not mean I cannot act as if it's not true, which means I'm at peace. That's the inside-out approach when we talk about the natural flow of the river. That's what we're talking about. Establish first in yourself that which you want to experience, that state of mind, that emotional state. The outside in is to paddle against the current. We don't have any place to go, so let's get frantic. Let's react to that. Let's say I must solve the problem outside of myself first before I can establish peace in myself. So what we're doing there is we're paddling up the river. we're paddling against the current. The current is, first of all, being aware of what I want to experience on the inside and allowing myself to do that. Sometimes we just sit down and become still and let go of all of the stuff that's going on in our minds, all the monkey mind chatter. We let all that go and we touch that place of peace in ourselves. And we find it's always there if we are open to it. But if we're doing the outside-in approach, we're not usually open to it. We're saying, I can't be peaceful because this thing is not resolved. And if I were to act like I was peaceful, that would look like I was irresponsible. Everybody would wonder why I'm so peaceful when we have such a big problem. You probably remember the story of Jesus in the boat during the storm, sleeping. And his disciples were really put out by that. They said, how can you sleep when we're all about to die? They were all in the same boat, but having different experiences. So that's what we're talking about, the inside out. It's very difficult to accomplish that. But it's doable, and if we look at the teachings of Jesus, he doesn't go into great depths or great detail about how to get to that place. He just said it's available, it's an option. Because a lot of this is up to us. How we decide to go. But he talked about this inner flow. He said, the water that I shall give will become in him a spring of water, welling up to eternal life. And if you can just imagine an imaginary spring in your own being, welling up and flowing over like a fountain would. It's kind of an illustration of this from the inside out approach. The water that I shall give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. I've always liked that image. Okay, we have two kinds of approaches. And I've been talking about the authors of the Gospels as being evangelists, and I am only repeating what the critical scholar has said for years. That they were not historians, they were not journalists, they were evangelists. They had a message they were sharing through the Gospels, and they were not biographers. They were sharing a message that had developed over a period of about 40 years. When Mark first appeared, that was the first gospel written, and appeared around 70 A.D., about 40 years after the death of Jesus. And then Matthew came along another 15 years later, and I think Luke and Acts came along later than that. John came along around 100 A.D. So there's a lot of space between when Jesus actually lived but the message about Jesus, who he was, had developed pretty well, and that's what the gospel writers were doing. But what's interesting about the mindset of the evangelist is the evangelist believes the world needs to be changed. There's a problem, and so we need to fix it. And the way we fix it is go out and convert as many people as possible. And Mark actually has Jesus say this, go into all the world and preach the gospel to the whole creation. That's the mindset of the evangelist. The world is broken, it needs to be fixed, and the way we do that is send out people to change people's minds, to get converts. The mystic takes a very different approach, and I believe this is the approach Jesus took. The mystic understands it is the way we see the world that needs to change. It's not so much the world, although there's always conditions in the world that need to change, but if you are sitting here in your life having a negative experience because of the conditions of the world, you've got two options. You can either paddle up the stream and try to change the world so you can be peaceful, or you can accept the world as it is and accept the truth that you are in the presence of God right now and that you can have peace. It is here now. Do you not say there are yet 4 months, then comes the harvest? I tell you, lift up your eyes and see how the fields are already white for harvest. The 4 months represents, if we just paddle up that stream far enough, we're going to find what we're looking for. But he's basically saying, let go, because what you're looking for is here. It's here now. It's a completely different attitude. And this ties in to a question that was raised by Bev this week about grace. And you'll understand how this ties in just a moment. The typical definition for grace is the unmerited favor of God. The truth about grace is the river flows in a single direction. Grace is knowing that at any moment we can turn and go with the flow. So it's like the river doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to bestow anything. Doesn't have to do something we have not earned. It just does what it does, and it flows. The question is, what are we doing? Are we paddling upstream, or are we letting go and letting the current carry us? And we'll look at some signs on how we can determine the difference in just a moment. But the river does not punish or impose our struggle. Struggle comes with our choice to paddle upstream. As a teacher, Jesus tried to help people understand the nature of the river and then learn to recognize which way they were paddling their canoe. And I do believe that. He talked about consider the lilies of the field, the birds of the air. There's a natural flow. How is it that animals know how to do this? There was a little bird out in the front the other day, and I was just watching him, a little flycatcher type bird, and just thinking, how does he know what to do? Probably has no degrees, never been to any instructional school, just comes with that understanding. He knows how to go with the flow, in other words. And he's a insect catcher, so what's he do when winter comes? He flies south. He flies to where the insects are. How does he know to do that? Or how does a spider know how to build a web if it's never even seen an insect? Doesn't know anything about flying insects. How do they know? They're going with the flow. There's a natural inside-out instruction that they come with. We call it instinct. But at the human level, we call it intuition. It's a matter of, it's not stopping doing what we're doing, but it's how we do it. We are either going with the flow or we are going against the current. And we can always tell by how we feel. It doesn't mean that we give up our goals. If we think some goal that we have is upstream, it's never upstream. We may be paddling upstream because we're having a negative reaction to the circumstances. So the upstream or downstream, we're really talking about how we feel as we advance toward our situation, toward our goal. But we're not punished by the situation. We're not punished by the natural flow of things. It has no ability to do that. It doesn't say, oh, you are a good boy today, so I will let you go with the flow. It's always saying that. It doesn't judge. It can't judge. It's a natural flow, and we are either in it or we're flowing, paddling against it. But there's two upstream views that we need to think about how we are looking at our own life. Because of the inherent difficulties of life in a body, it is easy to believe that paddling upstream is the intended human condition. The mainstream Christian assumes we're being tested by the current to see if we're worthy of reaching that place of eternal rest and peace upstream. The alternative Christian believes there are lessons to be learned from the struggle, but all will be worth it when we reach that great moment of enlightenment, which is also upstream. So there's this idea, and it's very easy to buy into it because life is very challenging sometimes. Life in a body is very challenging sometimes. Why would we put a canoe in the water in the first place? Beth and I used to have a drift boat. It's not really capable of going upstream. You have to go with the flow all the time. But you could try to go upstream, and it'd be very difficult. But we have put in at Corn Lake and drifted down to Fruta. We did that together one time, and then I did it by myself. What would cause a person to do something like that? And the answer I would come up with is I just wanted to do it. I wanted to have the experience. Did I know everything that was involved in doing that the first time? No, I didn't. So you kind of take things as they come and you deal with situations as they unfold. But the river itself has always been there, and it doesn't impose any kind of threats or any, it just is what it is. And the question is, why do you want to be there? And are you willing to deal with what the river gives you? And of course you have to be. And if you're not, you pull over and somehow get back home. But there's no judgment. That's what I'm trying to say. There's no judgment from the natural flow of the river. The judgment comes from our own capability. Why am I on the river in the first place? Why am I in this life? And I would like to think it's for the same reason that I would get on the river, because I wanted this experience. Do I like every aspect of it? Do I enjoy the rapids I get involved in sometimes? Not really. But what's the alternative? Pull over and turn around, try to paddle up the river. With the drift boat, you can't do that. It's hard enough just holding those big oars. They're heavy, and they're made just to steer. But if you try to paddle any distance at all, it'll just wear you to a frazzle. And so does life. When we're paddling against that stream, we get into a situation that we don't know how to handle. But what I found out, because I had never done that before on my own, is that you just wait and get to the rapids. You get to the point where you're not quite sure how to handle, and you just take it a moment at a time. And you steer your way around, and sometimes you'll hit a rock and it'll spin you around. You go down backwards for a little bit, but you're still okay. And I'm not saying to take any foolish, we've been with professional river runners that I wouldn't try that in a million years. That would be many incarnations from now that I would consider that. It's bad enough when you're with somebody that knows what they're doing, but it's very exhilarating as long as you've got somebody in the pilot seat. But the point I think that I'm trying to make here is, what is the point of being in this place that we are in our life right now? We put our canoe in here. Why? Why did we do that? And I like to think that it's because I want to be here. I want to have this experience. And I am not aware of everything that's going to happen. I'm not aware of what's around that next bend. Not aware of all the rapids. I'm not aware of, the challenges, those logs that might be under just under the surface, the rocks or whatever. But I like to think I'm here because I want to be. And if you get that sense of, think of this church right now. We're here because we want to be. Every choice we have made to bring us here, we made because we wanted to make it. And so here we are, Are we in a place of uncertainty? Maybe. Are we in a place where we cannot access peace of mind and the sense that everything's unfolding in divine order? We're never in that place. We're always in the place where we can be still and know. We can take our eyes off of the river for a time, and maybe we do need to pull off and meditate for a bit before we hit that next rapid. Nothing wrong with that. There's no time limit on this. The prodigal son, Jesus' parable of the prodigal son, he spent the first half of his journey paddling upstream. And you can imagine he was a young kid. He had a pocket full of money and he was very strong. Paddling upstream was no big deal for a while. But the first half of the journey was paddling upstream. When he reached his point of absolute failure and exhaustion, all he was required to do was turn his canoe and flow back into the everlasting arms of a loving Father. So where does grace play into this? The Father did not say, you're a bad kid, but I love you anyway. And the Father never even questioned it. Kid comes back, he's got a story all prepared. Dad, I sinned and I'm really messed up and I'm sorry and all of this. Well, the Father didn't even want to hear that. In other words, you can talk to the river all you want, but it's never going to condemn you. It's never going to say, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be on me. What I'm going to throw out to you is far beyond anything you can handle. But in the parable of the prodigal son, nothing had to change except the direction the kid was paddling. And then he was carried home. A very important idea. We're in a situation we don't understand. Instead of doing an outside in, I've got to have a resolution so I can be at peace. Let's go from the inside out. Let's go with the flow. And say, I will first establish myself in peace. I don't have to know what to do at this moment. Something in me knows. That spider knows how to build a web for something that's never seen. That bird knows how to catch an insect even when winter comes on and they move south. It knows how to do that. To say that we cannot worship God and mammon, another part of the heart of Jesus' teachings, is another way of saying we can't travel in two directions at once. Either we're paddling against the current or we're going with the flow. This can be a very helpful image for us to consider. So a good question to ask ourselves. The river flows in one direction. Think of this thing we're talking about, this cosmic flow, this creative essence flowing through us right now. The river flows in one direction. Am I paddling against the current or am I flowing with it? To find out, I only need to look at how I'm handling my life. Am I stressed out, fighting for every inch that I gain? Or am I relaxed and enjoying my journey? Am I praying for the river to help me win my upstream battle? Or am I affirming the natural flow of the river is now carrying me to my greatest good? So we don't think about, am I paddling up the river? I can't solve this problem. We don't look at it that way. We look at how we are responding. We have this situation in our lives. Are we resisting it? Are we fighting? Are we worrying? Staying awake at night? Wondering how it's going to be resolved? Then we're paddling up the stream. It's a good question to ask yourself. To me, it's a great image. It's something easy to grasp. Whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe you have received it. Is that what you're doing? To make that statement and to actually believe that you've received what you are looking for already, you're turning your canoe around and going with the flow. That's what Jesus is teaching. Learn how to go with the flow. The flow is there. That's the fact. And it's not condemning. You're not being condemned by the river, you're being condemned by the direction that you're paddling. So that's self-inflicted problem. As Sig Paulson used to say, SIN, self-inflicted nonsense. Paddling up the river. So we monitor ourselves in this way. And then we take another step back and say, why did I put my canoe on this river in the first place? And let's get to the point where we can answer that question by saying, I wanted to be here. I want to be here. I'm not saying to my life, I wish you'd change so I could like you better. I wanted to be here. I wanted to be on this river, rapids and all. And I'm willing to accept that. If the kingdom of God is within, that makes perfect sense. That it's within my ability to simply turn my canoe around and go with the flow. What you would also notice is if you're paddling up the river, are you going to be laid back looking at the scenery and enjoying your journey? If you're flowing with the river, you'll tend to be more alert, more tuned in to life. The quality of your life will go up tremendously. Well, our prayers are often attempts to change the course of the river. Jesus seemed pretty clear that our priority should be to seek first an understanding of the river's natural flow, and the rest would be added as well. The scenery is just as beautiful upstream or down, but we are more likely to enjoy this journey going with the flow. You agree? Pretty easy, right? That's the thing that we need to watch. What makes this so difficult is because we don't believe the spiritual principle that we are actually in a flow. We believe it and we really want to believe it, but when we're confronted with something we don't understand, that kind of goes out the window. And we turn our canoe up and we go up, start paddling up the stream frantically. So whatever's going on in your life at this moment, just think of this. Think of yourself. You're on a river. Which way are you paddling? How do you feel? Take a look at that and see what you can do to turn your canoe around. And next week I want to kind of follow up on this. I've got another idea I want to share with you about this, how to do this, and the advantages of doing it. But every one of us have something in our life where we are probably paddling up the stream. And we can take a look at that, use this illustration to help us get in touch with which way we're going, which way we're trying to go. Okay. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.